Hello and welcome to this discovery session for our 2018 Ashford University Teaching and Learning Conference. My name is Herminder Wright and I will be your host for this session. Today we will be discussing types of conflict, how conflicts escalate, and principles for getting to yes. Today our presenters are from Ashford University's our professors Bill Davis, Dr. Charles Minnick, Dr. Marty McAuliffe. This presentation will allow attendees an opportunity to understand organizational conflict, how it escalates, and will present principles for conflict resolution and getting to yes. Principles from the Fisher Ury book, Getting to Yes, Negotiating Agreements Without Giving In. About our presenters, today we first have Bill Davis, Program Chair and Assistant Professor for the Forbes School of Business and Technology. Next we have Dr. Charlie Minnick for Ashford University, Clinton campus. And lastly, we have Marty McAuliffe, Associate Professor for Ashford University College of Liberal Arts. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Bill Davis.
Thank you, Herminda. Before we begin about our content and the references, how we came up with some of the content you're going to see and some of our experiences with it. The content in this presentation is from Getting to Yes, Fisher Ury, also from some of the consulting we've done, conflict management, Getting to Yes presentations. We worked with the Instructional Services Department here at Ashford University in 2007, 2009, so that some of the content is from there. Our teaching and career experience, teaching conflict courses, how to resolve conflict. Also, too, from our professional sales, marketing, and negotiating training, and also, too, from labor relations. You know, change, conflicts, and escalation, change can be difficult for some. Change may create a reaction at times and conflict. You know, change creates motion, and motion can create friction. There's different types of conflicts in the workplace: intrapersonal, interpersonal, cognitive conflicts, normative conflicts. So a lot of those things happen, especially when change is occurring. You know, the stages of conflict escalation, using Thomas's model of escalation, is first there's an awareness of tension when someone might conflict with someone. And then eventually that can escalate into where relationships get severed, and then it escalates further into where there's some dysfunction. There could be some inefficiencies in the system because of conflict, but there are stages where conflict escalates. The types of conflict, again, interest conflicts, cognitive conflicts, normative. You know, when I teach conflict at Ashford University, one of the books that we used said there's basically three types of conflicts people bump. An interest type conflict. They both want the same thing, and as they're going toward the goal, they may bump. And then sometimes that escalates where relationships get hurt or damaged a little bit, and someone gets bruised. And then sometimes, you know, conflicts escalate to where they're not right to do. You know, people are starting to sever relationships. People are arguing, and that becomes dysfunctional. So, you know, when we look at that, we want to understand there will be occasional bumps and interest conflicts as we all move toward the same thing. You know, communication during change, share the bigger picture. Make sure people see the vision where you're going. Avoid those distractions. Stay focused, you know, stay aligned. You know, be specific. And remember, as you're passing information on down, it affects everyone, and the multiplier occurs. And more people start to understand when you're communicating right. Speak the native tongue. Create two-way conversations. Gain immediate feedback. And the power of body language. Be aware of your nonverbals. You know, there's three types of communication. There are audio, auditory. When you're talking to someone, there are there's the content that you're trying to transfer. There's the tone that you set. You know, so just be aware of how you do communicate and some of the styles that you use. So having that self-awareness is going to help you and help you with your body language. Now, just something to reflect on as you're listening to the presenters today. You know, what is negotiation? Think about that when you're trying to negotiate something with someone. What's meant by successful negotiation? What are some skills associated with successful negotiation? What's an objection? I learned early in my career that an objection is simply a question or concern. So just because someone may have an objection doesn't necessarily mean they're not agreeing with you. They just might not understand. So answer those questions. What's an outcome that arises from the negotiations and conversations? What are some successful and unsuccessful negotiations that you've had when you have been involved in a negotiation? And then what were the outcomes? Now I would like to turn it over to Dr. Charlie Minnick.
All right, Bill, thanks. So I think so the book we've talked about is Fisher Ury. It's a really classic book. I think it was authored in the late 90s, but still really relevant for trials and tribulations and conflicts that we have in our life and in organizational life as well. So the book is kind of broke down quickly in just a couple chapters. Talks about, problems that arise using standard strategies when you get into positional versus interest bargaining. And chapters 2 through 5 talks about the 4 principles that we'll talk about today. So getting to negotiations, a fact of life. Anybody who's been married knows you negotiate. Anybody who has kids know you negotiate. Anybody who's in the workforce, we're always negotiating something. Could be with a peer, could be with a supervisor. So we're always negotiating something in life. And the more and more we go through life, I think requires additional negotiation. I think as organizations become more complex, social media plays into it. So we have to have more and more opportunities to negotiate in our life. Every negotiation is different, but the basic elements are not changed, and that's kind of what we'll look at today. Principal negotiation can be used whenever there is one issue or several. So sometimes there's lots of things going on in negotiation, but what we'll talk about today will be useful, again, if there's one issue or several that are in play. Okay. So the 4 basic components we'll talk about is separate people from the problem, focus on interest, not positions, invent options for mutual gain, and insist on using objective criteria. Okay. So why can conflicts be tough to manage? First of all, you're dealing with people. Everybody has different interests, different positions, and people have good days, bad days, up days, down days. So people act and think in certain ways. So that always makes conflict a little bit difficult. Sometimes the people are involved. Perceptions are very powerful things. Heard the old saying, perception is reality. So what people perceive to be going on can be their reality. So that we have to play with that as we go along. There's very powerful needs and wants in our life. Some of us are basic security, economic well-being, a sense of belonging. Do we know we matter? I believe there's a certain human need of people to know they matter and that they fit somewhere in life. And recognition, how do people want to be recognized? People want to be recognized different ways. So different things to think about as we go through. Change can create conflict at times, and change can be very difficult for people. Think about in your own life how things might have changed or been different one way from one day to the next, how difficult it might have been to manage that sort of change, just for yourself, let alone for a group of people. So remember, always before beginning a negotiation or handling conflict, please know the situation and your purpose at hand. It will help with the process. So the first one that we're going to look at is separate people from the problem. So strong emotions are often involved in conflict situations. So if you think about conflict you're currently involved in or one in the past, sometimes people get really worked up. There could be yelling, screaming, all sorts of emotions going on. So strong emotions are usually involved in conflict. And the more we care about something, the stronger those emotions are. Hurting people's feelings just makes it worse. Okay? Calling people names, trying to make people feel bad does not help the process at all. It's just going to it's going to escalate the conflict and make it much more difficult to try to come to some sort of amicable conclusion at the end. Speak for purpose. I think we have to go, what purpose, and if I'm going to say something, what purpose is it going to serve? Is it going to try to help the conflict move forward, maybe be resolved, or am I just saying something just to get something off my chest with the hope of digging at someone? That's not helpful either. And when anger is high, some things are best left unsaid. We probably all had the time, well, boy, you know what? I wish I hadn't said that. So if you think back to speak for purpose, some things when you're really angry, some things are best left unsaid. And I think that goes also into with electronic communication. I always believe you should hit the think button before you hit the send button. Okay, so that might help with some of that sort of when things are high, anger's, emotions are high. Sometimes it's best just to step back. And again, to play off that, when making a statement, what purpose will it serve? Is it serving to help with understanding, or is it meant to just dig at someone to try to let them know maybe you're smarter than them, maybe have more power than them? So before making a statement, really know what is this going to serve? How is it going to try to help the situation? Okay. So also, again, we talked about the strong emotions. So think about conflicts you've been involved in. You've probably felt many of these things and more than one at the same time. People become angry. People become depressed. People become fearful what might happen. People become hostile. People become frustrated. Some people get distant. And I think that's also a problem we try to work through conflict is when people become distant and just quit talking altogether. That can be really troubling. So I think the distant one can be especially troubling when people just shut down altogether. I'm not going to talk at all. That can make it much worse. Okay? So don't blame the other person. It's easy to point fingers. You're the problem for this. You're the reason for this. So I've taught conflict management class in the past. That one of the first assignments we do is people talk about a conflict they're currently embroiled in or one they just got out of. And many, many times that people try to think that they're not part of the problem. It's always this other character who's causing their troubles. Well, many times as we work through the process and we use this and the Thomas model of conflict resolution is that, you know what, maybe I am part of the problem. So don't be so quick to blame the other person for what's going on. Again, act as a partner, not an enemy. How can we work collaboratively to try to work through this conflict that we have? Sometimes a cooling off period's okay. Sometimes you just got to back off, and we're gonna come back when emotions have calmed down. Maybe we'll come back an hour, come back tomorrow. When things have cooled off, maybe that's what's necessary sometimes to help with things. Symbolic gestures are good. I think you can say, I'm sorry, I was wrong, those sort of things. But it needs to be genuine and you mean it from your heart. You know what? I'm sorry, I was wrong. You were right. What can we do to work together for the betterment of the people and the issue at hand? Most importantly, deal with people as human beings. We all have good days, bad days, up days, down days. We all have those days. And we have to realize other people do it as well. We all have those days where if anybody gives me any more grief, there's going to be victims. You have to avoid that. Everybody has those days. So we have to realize that with people, that everybody's a human being and we all have those kind of days. So I think we realize that will be helpful as well. So next one we'll talk a little bit about is focus on interests, not positions. So everybody has some basic human interests. Security. We all want to be safe in our world. Economic well-being. Hope we have enough money to pay our bills and do some other fun things that we like to do in life. Sense of belonging. Everybody, I think, needs to know that they matter at some point in life. When I did my dissertation, we did some research called a sense of belonging. It was where it talked about the mattering theory, that people need to know they matter and that have someone's attention and someone cares about them. I think that's a human need. People need to know they matter. And recognition, as we talked earlier. People want to be recognized for what they do. The key is how do people like to be recognized. So I think those are some really powerful interests that most every human being has. Okay. So if you want the other side to understand your interests, seek to understand theirs first. So first to understand, tell me why you feel this way. Tell me why you have this position. Tell me why you have this interest. Tell me what got us to this point, as opposed to just hurry up and try to get to the end. I think we need to, in a listening thing, we need to listen more for understanding and less to listen just to reply. So I think we need to understand what people need. And I think one of the greatest communication tools we have is questions. Ask people questions as you try to understand their interests and how you can work best together. Look forward, not back. I think one of the worst things you can do is keep bringing up stuff from the past. Okay, that's not helpful. Well, you're always this way. You're this way. You know, bringing up trouble from the past is not helpful. Keep the focus on the solutions to the problem, not who's to blame. Again, it doesn't help to point fingers. That's just not helpful as we go through the process. Okay, don't blame. Try to come to some collaborative resolution. Okay, be flexible and open to new ideas. I said an open mind is not an empty one. I think we want to have different approaches, ideas. You know, look for how can this solution be difficult for other people to implement. So I think you just be open to new ideas, new ways of doing things. Again, I think none of us is as smart as all of us. So be open to how we might move forward with this. Before negotiation, think of several options that would meet your interests. Okay, I think that's a going, okay, here's what I think will help meet my interest. I think before negotiation, think about when you buy a car. When people go buy a car, you have a good idea about, here's the most I'm going to pay for this vehicle. You know, and this is the most I'm going to pay. This is the best deal I can get. This is the okay option. So have different options in mind with the same type of negotiation we work with people. What's good, better, best as we go through it. And lastly is make sure attack the problem, not the person. Calling people names, not focusing on what the true problem is, attacking someone's personality, who they are. That's not helpful. It's gonna escalate the conflict in a negative sort of way. So it's gonna be very difficult then to try to come to some collaborative resolution. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Marty, who will talk about the last couple options for principal negotiation.
Thank you, Charlie. So basically, to dovetail off what Charlie just talked about is when you go into the negotiation, make sure you don't have just one goal in mind. You need to understand the other people's position, as we talked about, and you also need to think not just in your own interest, but also in the interest of others. Think about what the actual issue you're trying to address is. When we think about facts, I come from a law background, and the facts are simply the situation that's before you. There's no emotion involved. This is what it is. You know, if it's a business deal, we have X, Y, or Z widgets we need to sell, and our cost was A, B, or C, and we need to get to D, E, or F to make a profit. Anything along those lines, the cold, hard facts. Make sure that you're aware of what is best to be done, what ought to be done to solve the problem, meaning what is a mutually beneficial resolution of whatever you're dealing with. It's not just about you, it's actually both sides. The better you can consider both sides, the more likely you are to get through a problem. And then what are feasible suggestions for action? How do we get to D, E, and F after we've looked at what the options are and what we're doing? And then also what we have to do is understand multiple positions. We have looked through the eyes of different experts. So the more you can understand about what your situation is and what the other side's situation is, the better off you will be in your negotiation process. Knowledge is power. Knowledge is commodity. And the more you know, the better you'll be able to deal with people's objections, people's inherent inability to try to make change or try to see your position from your side. And also being law trained, we have the clue here of place yourself firmly in the shoes of the other side. Any good attorney is going to know the other side's case better than their own case. In order to do that, you actually have to understand what their positions are and what their liabilities and what their fears are so that you can address them. And now, when we talk about the academic setting, basically we need to get on a mutual ground with the students. And if you can draw on the past, don't look back in a negative way, as Charlie talked about, but if you can draw on positive experiences that you've had with the student in the past, or even other positive experiences the students had in general, you're in a much better position to solve whatever the issue is. And then ultimately know what implementing the decision, how it could be hard for the opposite side, for whoever you're negotiating with. If it's a student, yes, I know this paper is really long, but unfortunately I can't actually reduce the pages, but let me show you some resources that'll help you get to the types of issues you need to understand. So always think in those terms of assisting the other person rather than being a butting of the heads and trying to win necessarily. Once you have a solution in mind, you need to stick to it. Make sure that it's a principled decision. It's not based out of emotion like we talked about. It's objective, that it's fair, efficient, or it has scientific merit. Does it have basically a worthiness in and of itself is the goal that you're trying to get to and whatever you're trying to fix. Again, refer to precedents. What's happened, what's worked in the past. In a teaching setting, you can actually go back and explain how other students have approached things. The more you teach, the more you get to see the way students approach things. And that's a great way to educate the student that, hey, you're not alone. Other people have had this problem, and you need to try to reach the solution that way. And then also you can look outside the box, look for independent standards and fair solutions. That's one of the things that we need to continually do is don't be afraid to be creative. Just because you go into something with one mindset of I have to get this done, take that step back, take a moment and think about a way to get to the better solution in ways that you hadn't thought of before. Be creative. Then we also need to, with examining objective criteria, we can't give away the farm, so to speak. You have certain standards you have to standard by. Professional standards in the academic setting, we have to make sure that we're doing things in an academically credible and meaningful, and the wonderful term of academically rigorous way, if we're in the academic setting. Make sure we're as efficient as we can be. Hopefully goes without saying that everyone's treated equally, even people we've had issues with in the past, maybe former students that we haven't appreciated the way they've gone about things, and they may not appreciate the way we go about things. But make sure you're treating everybody in the same manner and fairly, and that you can support that. And then equal tradition basically talks about ways we've done things in the past. So, not to say that the past is always right, but we have a long history here with Ashford University and knowing the way things should be done. And then obviously upholding the highest moral standards. The big thing is don't allow an ethical or a moral decision to be, suspect, to become suspect or give in because of yielding to pressure. I have to get to a solution, so I'm going to cut this corner. That's never a good thing to do. And then the final tidbits, basically, whenever there's anger, diffuse the situation. One of the good ways to try to do that, at least, is state back to the person that might be upset, what I hear you say is this. And so to make sure that you're actually understanding what the merit or what the facts and the actual problem is. Because if you simply respond in an angry, terse way yourself, then basically communication stops. There is no exchange of ideas anymore. So we need to make sure that, we are meeting people's reasonable expectations as best we can. And before we end up with a no, hopefully we negotiate our ways into something that's mutually beneficial for both without giving up on anything that is significant. We talk with each other, not about each other. You certainly never take any conflict outside of where the conflict began. Don't go saying to other people, oh, I can't believe so-and-so did this. This is both pragmatic and realistic within the situation itself, because you never know down the line, whoever you might give a bad word about might be the person that you need to help you later, or the other person you're talking about, talking to about the other person might actually be a friend of the other person. And you don't really want that to come back as a reflection on you and how you deal with things. Does this relationship matter? In our setting, I think in the academic side, for sure, the answer is yes. And I think we'd always say yes. Even times when we don't actually get to the resolution we want to be able to leave in a respectable way so that hopefully people have an idea that they've been treated fairly and it doesn't hurt things down the line. Improved relationships is the best way to improve conflict resolution. This is done, as we talked earlier, about making sure we maintain those personal relationships. If something does go wrong, we apologize. And if we need help, we can collaborate with others that have been in the same situation and make sure that we get to the best resolution we can. Excellence in relations and customer service are basically our business. If people are out there saying, hey, don't go there because I had so-and-so and she or he was very unreasonable and never listened to me and didn't help me at all, that doesn't do any of our business good, regardless of where we're at. And whether in education or beyond, basically word of mouth is probably the strongest advertisement you can have. And once a negative reputation starts, it's very difficult to reverse. The experience students have in the classroom is what they remember, moving forward. So that's what we need to do, is to make sure that we give them the best experience we can. Basically, it's all about attitude. If you go into a situation with a negative attitude, you're going to get a negative outcome. If you're ready to listen and be creative and walk in other people's shoes, then you're going to be okay, and you're going to come up with a mutually agreeable resolution. And walk the walk and walk the talk as well. So you need to actually follow through with these things. Sometimes if you're in a bad situation with somebody or an uncomfortable situation, the last thing you want to do is write a sorry note. Even if you don't feel sorry, well, go ahead and do it anyway. Find a way to be as genuine as you can and preserve the relationship at all costs. Remember the Fish philosophy: choose your attitude, play, make their day, and be present. Basically, be in the moment. When you're with somebody, don't be thinking about, don't be thinking about what you actually have to do and that, to get that thing done. Pay attention to where you are in the moment and find the way to be present and not thinking about something else like what's going on later in the day. And here are Bill's personal notes. I want to turn it back to Bill at this point. You want to talk about your personal notes?
Sure. I'll just kind of close with this, Marty. Thank you very much. And Charlie and Marty, great job. You're refreshing me on some of these principles too. So it's nice to do this repetition and really focus us. Now, all I want to do with this particular slide is just say, just remember these things. Negotiation is just a process. You're trying to reach an agreement, achieve a mutually acceptable solution, satisfying conclusion, a win-win for all, and attempt to reconcile what constitutes a good result for you and the other party. Both sides win something, but to do this, preparation, proposal, there's some debate, bargaining, closing. It does go through a continuum. So just be aware of those dynamics. Again, you've heard it again in here, about skills needed, having a wide range of objectives, being flexible, adaptable, explore possibilities, that wide range, having your bat, if I don't get this and get this, but I get this situation, will things be okay? Usually they are. Prepare well in advance, interactive, listen and question, be flexible. That's a sign of strength, not a weakness. Adapt and emotional intelligence, being self-aware, being socially aware, managing relationships, all of that comes into play. These are just some tips for you to reinforce some of the learning that just occurred. With that said, I'd like to, on behalf of Dr. Minnick and Dr. McAuliffe, I'd like to say thank you, Ashford University TLC, for allowing us to present in this discovery sessions. If anyone in the audience has any questions, there's our emails. You can contact either one of us. We have a lot of content that we've saved through the years from teaching and from our own professional careers. Happy to share that and happy to pay it forward.